Let's go! Will LSU's rough start to the season hurt them in recruiting? A lot of you have been asking me that, and we're going to dive into it today. There is something I think we should pay attention to that we're not talking a whole lot about. We'll get to that a little bit later, but go on ahead, subscribe to the channel. When we get to 1.5 thousand subscribers, guess what? We're going to give out another card. You guys have been loving these prisms, and of course we're going to give out another one. Let's go. LSU's recruiting is not going to take a hit, okay? We'll get into the specifics about this recruiting class, but always remember this. Even in those middling Les Miles years, the lowest recruiting class that LSU had was, I believe, 15th. That was in 2018 when there was a transition phase. And guess what? That recruiting class was a huge bedrock to LSU's national championship team. LSU is normally no less than 10th. Let's add a little extra context to that. So LSU obviously won the national championship in 2019. Normally, the bedrock of a national championship team are the recruiting classes from the 2 years prior. So that is second and third year players. So the bedrock of the 2019 team was the 2018 recruiting class and the 2017 recruiting class. Those two recruiting classes were 15th and 7th nationally. Those two numbers barely aggregates outside the top 10. And normally, LSU recruits in the top 10. A lot of the times, they get into the top 5. So, as long as LSU is in the top 10-ish range, they are within reach to win a national championship. And even if they slip down to 14th and 15th a year or two, you're going to be okay. And here's the thing. You look at some of these programs that have actually lost a lot and have performed under expectations. Take, for instance, Texas. They still recruit at a ridiculous clip. So, yeah, let's be honest. Losses don't affect recruiting as much as one might think. Now, if you get blown out by Alabama, who is a rival, maybe that gives a coach a little extra gusto and confidence to call up that recruit the next day and say, look at what we did to them. But honestly, that might sway one or two kids. We have no science really to back that up. So, yeah, don't overreact to losses. Put yourself in the mind of a 17 or 18-year-old kid. If you see a team that is struggling, especially a program like LSU that is produced all these NFL level players. Whenever you see something like that, your initial reaction to it as a player isn't so much that, oh my goodness, they are awful. No, it's the exact opposite. It is, oh my goodness, I could play right away. Like Korey Foreman and Maason Smith are probably saying right now, and who could blame them? They would be playing right now if they had the opportunity. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the results, but overall, recruiting, okay? Number one, LSU is LSU. Doesn't matter who the coach is, whether it's Ed Orgeron or Les Miles, because Nick Saban in 2003 set that championship standard and did a lot of things to get the recruiting machine going at LSU. It's never really stopped. LSU is LSU, but while the Tiger brand recruits itself, it does help that you have Ed Orgeron, who is known by many as the greatest recruiter of all time. This guy has done it everywhere, and he will continue to do it everywhere. The one thing, and anyone that knows anything about Ed Orgeron, that he loves to do more than anything else when it comes to college football is recruiting. That is his forte. So when you have both of those things going your way, who can stop this man? Dead serious. Don't you think that Ed Orgeron has already been making those calls to said recruits and his staff, his guys like Christian Lacouture and Kelvin Shepard, who are player analysts and assistants? That's one of their biggest jobs, to stay on top of this thing. And come on. If I've interviewed both of those guys are very much like Ed Orgeron. They work their tails off. So don't panic. That's why LSU pays all these assistants and these analysts and these directors. They all have an individual job. They have plenty of people that are taking care of the recruiting, even though the LSU team right now is in turmoil. Let's actually get down into the nitty-gritty. Let's look at the class of 2021. This is a 5th ranked class nationally, with the Maason Smith, Korey Foreman, Tristan Leigh, and Sage Ryan dominoes out there. Let's say LSU only lands 2 of those 5 stars. You still end up with a top 5 class easily, with room to spare. I think most recruiting experts believe LSU is going to land at least 1, if not 2, if not all 4 of them. If that's the case, LSU is easily, and I mean easily, cementing themselves into the top 5. And even if the class of 2021 tanks, let's take a look at the class of 2022, where LSU has the number 1 ranked class. And I know it's early in the process, but for the top 10 players nationally, LSU actually looks pretty good for some of them. There's an offensive tackle out of Monroe I like a lot, so LSU's going to be just fine for the class of 2022. And on top of that, LSU has done, I would say, better than most in the SEC when it comes to JUCO transfers. It has been a gold mine for LSU. This year, it's been Ali Gay. Last year was Damian Lewis, and the list goes on. And not even JUCO transfers, just regular transfers. Jabril Cox, yes, he's had a rough couple of games, but at least you got a starter in the transfer market. And some dude, what's his name? Come on. He played quarterback. That guy. Those have been huge. And Thaddeus Moss, I mean, the list goes on. LSU is going to be on top of the transfer market as well. Oh, yeah, stop. Don't worry about recruiting. Don't refresh Maason Smith and Korey Foreman's Twitter feed every 2 seconds. And I know some of you do that, but, you know, calm down. It's okay. LSU is going to be just fine. Losing this kid there or this decommitment there, LSU is LSU. Now, that one big thing. What is that one big thing? If LSU, for some reason, turns into, let's say, Florida State, you will slip. You will slip. More than likely, you will slip into the mid-teens and the 20s. But that is only if pandemonium happens. That's only if the treacherous. That's only if the treacherous, I can't even say that word. That's only if you go into latter-day Jimbo Fisher at Florida State and then into Willie Taggart, into where they are right now. Yeah, if LSU has, let's just say LSU just tanks out the rest of the year. The only win on their schedule is Vanderbilt, which is not going to be the case. I do think LSU will get to 5-5, if not 4-6. You know, I think most recruits would look at that rationally and say, look, it was a pandemic. They lost 30 key personnel and players to the draft. I can't get too mad at that. And the elite prospects will still go, and then LSU with senior quarterback Myles Brennan, with second-year Eric Gilbert and second-year Elias Ricks and third-year Derek Stingley, will be back to a top 10 program, you know, the next year. Hopefully everything is back to normal. I am hoping everything is back to normal by then. That's me just being Optimus Prime. I could argue that the NIL, which, by the way, I've read some stuff. LSU is actually trying to get ahead of this NIL. They just hired a huge consulting firm to help them with this, which ironically includes Urban Meyer. So I don't want to get into that today. I could argue, though, that the NIL is an even bigger issue, not only for LSU, but everyone moving forward, compared to actual recruiting. Yeah, don't panic. Heck, you have Ed Orgeron. He could still call up a kid and say, hey, you know, we had the best team ever, and I coached Warren Sapp, Cortez Kennedy, Arden Key. Come play for me, and that's simple. I'd go play for Ed Orgeron. Heck, I love the dude. Subscriber shout out. Let's start with my friend and yours, Goose. We needed this break. If Brennan is out against South Carolina, who should be the QB? Max Johnson or TJ Finley? Oh, this question, which is legit impossible to answer because we haven't seen either one of them, and we can't actually attend practice. So LSU is still deciding who that backup will be. My intel tells me Max Johnson is slightly ahead. I don't know. Both of them have big arms. Both of them have big frames. I think both of them are more mobile than Myles Brennan. So yeah, that's a really tough question to answer considering, I'm not able to be at practice. Korey says you can't really bash LSU's defense when Florida is averaging 10 yards less a game allowed on defense and Bama almost allowed 700 to Ole Miss. So, I get it. I think all of us can recognize that the SEC right now is a mess defensively. Everybody has played bad defense, maybe outside of Arkansas, but legit, everybody has looked somewhat porous on offense. Here's the difference when it comes to LSU. Mississippi State and Missouri both have looked less than stellar against the other teams that they've played. Yes, Missouri had not put up 20 points in a game before they played LSU. Jesse says, too bad this isn't Alabama, right? Well, I don't know how much better Alabama is than Florida. Obviously, Alabama is dealing with their own issues with the pandemic, with the greatest college football coach ever. So, yeah, I do agree with the second half here. LSU can be a not great but good team by the end of the year. We have so much talent. Absolutely. And I trust Ed Orgeron to get it fixed. You should not be losing to Mississippi State and Missouri. You shouldn't be able to not make adjustments to beat those teams defensively. That's the big issue. It goes along with Korey's comment, and he actually made a good point. We should recognize that all these SEC defenses aren't as historically good as they once were. I'm not denying that truth. It's just this team has enough talent, and yes, they're inexperienced, but they have enough talent to at least get to 4 or 5 wins this year. Let's go. We can do this. Let's go. Last one here from Sherman. If we fire Pelini, who would be some good candidates? Okay. That's tough. It's really tough because so much changes from here until now. That's if LSU decides to fire Bo Pelini. You'd have to pay out his multi-million-dollar buyout contract, which, by the way, wasn't a good idea. I don't know why LSU forked over all that money to him. But still, it's weird because the best defensive coordinator in the SEC was a head coach in the SEC last year. That is Barry Odom. He's had by far the best start, especially as a first-year defensive coordinator with the Arkansas Razorbacks. So a lot of your best candidates are still coaching now. Remember, at LSU, you can pick whoever, and I mean whoever, to be your defensive coordinator. There are a lot of elite head coaches at non-Power 5 schools that would love to get the DC money and coach at LSU to be their DC because, Bo Pelini is making more than double the best coach in the Sun Belt is getting now. So, it's a job that a lot of people want. It's power. Hour LSU. Boom. Pow, pow. Leftover chicken parm. Let's go. Let's go.